Hello, everyone. This is going to be a tough one. Now, first of all, let me say I'm wearing my Bray Wyatt shirt. SummerSlam is tomorrow. I'm cooking hamburgers and hot dogs. It is going to be awesome, but I am very, very, very upset about what happened with Bray Wyatt. I know it's kind of probably this is not going to be the most fun stream today because of how unbelievably dark the subject matter is. But I got to start out with at least a little wrestling nonsense. Isn't this a great shirt, by the way? Like, I'm never going to understand why The Fiend got released. Anyway, well, at least I got some wrestling to look forward to this weekend. As far as the mental health diary that I've been keeping, classes start next week, lots of stress, but overall, I'm doing pretty good, and that might be why I'm feeling a little ambitious this week and talking about what is the single darkest thing I have encountered in so long. Now, so this isn't exactly new, but I have been aware of Chris Chan. He's been somebody who's been floating in the periphery as someone who, well, I don't consider myself an expert in internet culture, but I'm up on the memes, right? I know a little bit. I mean, I'm on Reddit. I have a little bit, I have a little bit of knowledge when it comes to, what's going on in the interwebs. But the news broke recently of Chris Chan's arrest and what he was arrested for. And again, everybody's innocent till proven guilty. But what he's arrested for is so unbelievably messed up. And the fact that, I don't even want to get into it specifically. Let's just say that, in a lot of ways, he snapped, right? He snapped in a way that I think everybody saw coming. This man is one of the most documented human beings in the history of the world. And I had heard through multiple channels about the documentary that was available on YouTube by Geno Samuel 2.1. Each of the episodes of this documentary are around 45 minutes long, and I'm on episode 31. The sheer amount of Chris Chan content that is contained within this single documentary is absolutely mind-blowing. And I'm not even 100% certain this documentary covers what has happened with his arrest. Now, again, I'm not exactly someone who is looking to monetize this channel. He seems to have raped his own mother. So, as someone who has always been really interested in the extremes of human behavior, the absolute darkest polarity of, the human mind, I was like, what the hell happened there? And who is this guy? And how on earth is there so much information available about him? So I've been laying in bed at night just watching this documentary, and I don't think watching a train wreck is an appropriate metaphor for this. This is a never-ending fountain of mental illness. And what makes this so fascinating is the fact that it seems to have attracted and brought so many people into its orbit. Now, I don't want to go into the history of Chris Chan too much because I think anybody who stumbles upon this video is going to be aware of what's going on with this subject, right? If you want to educate yourself on Chris Chan and who he was, check out that documentary, right? That's got everything that you would ever need to know. What has gotten me fascinated with Chris Chan is the very odd mental health aspect of it. Christine Weston Chandler, as he would later be called, was high-functioning autistic. Now, a lot of times we can throw around autism spectrum stuff. I have some habits and I have some things that might, be triggers for autism spectrum type behaviors. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I have skin picking. I have some flailing issues sometimes. I wouldn't consider myself anywhere near what most people would call autistic. That being said, what Christian was wrestling with is extremely real. And throughout his story, the fact that she, I believe they go by she now, so I need to make sure that I use the correct pronouns as much as I possibly can. I am live streaming this, so keep in mind, I don't really go back and edit stuff. I do things very off the cuff because I like that kind of like raw reaction type of thing. She was trapped in her own world, isolated to the point of almost being in a kind of weird public solitary confinement. Now, juxtapose that with how public she was. The fact that so many people knew everything about her as she was going through these multiple trolling machinations that were controlling her life. We've got a juxtaposition of a public persona that is hopelessly isolated within their home. We already have an absolute hotbed of kind of mental turmoil and destruction. Now, add on top of that something that happens with a lot of individuals with these types of developmental issues. I'm going to use the term that I have come to identify a lot with these issues, which I think she may have actually been on the forefront of this before this became an actual thing, what we would call inceldom, being involuntarily celibate. I'm fascinated because, and again, I'm going to get really personal here for a minute, but that's something I kind of like to do on Performative Mental Health, is to talk a lot about my own experience with my own mental health issues. I feel a really weird amount of kinship with Christine, with Christian, with Chris Chan. Earlier in my life, I had some very similar issues. Now, mine kind of came from a different direction. For him, it's lodged so fully in the autism spectrum disorder, right? The inability to connect with people, to understand kind of the rules and consequences of your actions in society will absolutely just dislodge you in your ability to connect with others. And if you struggle to connect with others, your ability to form romantic relationships of any type is severely stunted. For me, I struggled to form relationships myself. There were a lot of reasons for this. One, I was very immature. In high school, I was extremely immature, even going into college. I actually lived with my parents through most of college, and I lived very far away from the college I attended. I lived in a rural area, and I was still really, really immature, right? So the reason that I find this interesting is when as a young adult, you struggle to form and experience romantic type, things. I do believe that there is a great deal of mental trauma that results from that. That's extremely difficult to get out from under. And the weird thing is, I was extremely lucky that once I did finally move out of my parents' house and go to graduate school, that was kind of when my social life finally bloomed in a lot of ways. That's when I grew up. I was out on my own. And that was when I finally started to experience those things. And I met my wife very soon after that. So for me, it was more of an issue of getting around people my age and, living my life and being out on my own, right? That was the real problem for me. But the weird thing is, I struggled with it for a long time. I didn't even kiss anyone until I was like 22. And the point behind this is, that causes you to get worse. that actually causes a great deal of like psychological trauma that I think most people aren't aware of, because romantic entanglements and connecting with the opposite sex, or connecting with the gender that you're attracted to, is something that really does come naturally for most people. Almost like, as part of like a coming of age thing. Most people don't have to work to find a significant other. For most people, it almost seems to happen as if by accident. It's almost something that seems to be bestowed upon you, right? And so when it's something that actually is difficult for you, I really want to write something about this, whether it's like a nonfiction exploration or something, but it causes a great deal of like compounded problems. The resentment that grows as someone lives a life where they are an incel, where they are involuntarily celibate, actually isolates you further. And that further isolation compounds and makes you even more socially like tainted. You just don't mesh well with other people. You become very self-obsessed. You become very like in any case, it's like a stunt in mental development. And that was something that, I struggled with for a long, long time. So one of the things that I've noticed in watching the Chris Chan videos, and I'm realizing as much as I hate to do this, I think I might actually have to split this into a part 1 and part 2. As I watch the Chris Chan videos, we have this individual who is struggling with multiple problems. Right. And that's kind of what I want to do with this video, is to kind of explore the myriad of issues that Christian was facing that may have caused his mind to completely like blow out in a lot of ways. He's struggling with high functioning autism. He is extremely, extremely immature, to the point that in the comments, people are often making the comparison that he's like an 8-year-old trapped in a grown man's body, right? On top of this, he's got this incel issue that he has needs and he has desires that he, for whatever reason, and anybody who's watching this documentary can immediately tell you what the reason is, he can't fulfill, right? It's out of his reach. These two things alone are actually causing his mind to almost break apart, right? The autism itself stunts his ability to grow as a person, because he just can't find people who will accept him. Now, and I think I've been thinking a lot about the question early in the introduction, when I can't believe I keep forgetting this. When Gino Samuel does the introduction for each, he asks the question, what made him this way? What's with the fascination? What's the attraction, right? So when they say what made him this way, I also think a lot about what could have helped him or her. Again, I know I'm really doing a terrible job with the pronouns. The thing is, she's known as Chris Chan, she's known as Chris, she's known as Christine. And also keep in mind, I'm watching this documentary in the process. So I'm still I'm about through the halfway point. So the transition stuff hasn't come into play yet. So I'm still thinking very much of Chris Chan as a male. But my big question is this: how could this have been prevented, right? All of this has to do with Christine's social environment. And this is another thing that she and I have in common: isolation. She lived in this isolated house with major hoarding issues. She ended up banned from all these places where she used to have social connection. Now, again, this is, keep in mind, I'm not necessarily placing any blame on the people who banned Christine. They were doing what they had to do to protect their business, right? So there's absolutely no blame here, but she was uprooted from any type of social connection she could have had. What Christine needed, I think, was people on her level, people who shared similar struggles, people who experienced the world in the same way that she did, that she would have been able to have conversations and connect with people in a way that wasn't possible for others who did not have that type of environment and did not have that internal difficulty, right? One of the things that she never seems to have had is a community of people who would have been able to empathize with her, right? Instead, what was the social environment that Christine armed herself with? It was the very trolls, it was the very people who were interacting to torment her. Now, this is where we get to flip this coin over and where the story goes from morbid to kind of like a weird social commentary, right? I had to pick up that nickel there to say the other side of the coin. In any case, the further you get into the documentary, the more you get to learn about some of the personalities and the identities of the people who were trolling Chris Chan, right? Who the hell were they that they devoted so much time and so much psychological effort to tormenting someone with the mental capability of an 8-year-old? A lot of people want to give Liquid Chris, the one who dressed up as Chris Chan, to mock and pretend to be him. A lot of people wanted to give him credit and say that of all the trolls, he was the one who was most lighthearted and non-destructive. Really just there to tease and mock and poke fun. But the question still remains, why would someone spend hours upon hours upon hours, so much effort invested into creating a character, putting together the costume, making the videos, strategizing this plot, this movie that they were basically tricking Chris Chan into starring in? What kind of a person does that? Even someone like me, who struggled throughout a good portion of their life with my own relationship issues, someone who had a lot of time on their hands to blow, I would never have imagined structuring so much of my life simply around tormenting someone else. What drives someone to do that? When I called this a fountain of mental illness, this is just as much a story of the trolls who tormented Chris Chan as it is about his very public I'm running out of words to use for it because it's so hard to describe, but his very public breakdown, his personal destruction. Who are the people who came together in an alliance to basically attack and destroy and torment an isolated autistic man living in the middle of Charlottesville? Why? That blows my mind. They're just as mentally ill as he is, but their mental illness is more of a sadistic, manipulative thing, right? And he literally just tore a hole in the psychic universe, and he existed within this singularity that pulled in the most negative influences possible. And the thing that's really heartbreaking about all this, the thing that drives me the most crazy, is how these trolls get close to him. Some of them give him advice on how to try to improve his life, however horribly misguided. And eventually, they all betray him, right? They all eventually end up crucifying him in one way or another. All of these people need mental help. All of these people are lacking something in their lives that's helping them move past this obsession. They're all horrifically similar, that they are hung up on this thing that they can't move past. It's like all these people in this story are sharing a collective mental embolism. And it's just, they're just hung up on it. They can't move past it. It's almost like a Greek tragedy of some type. It even has the incest that you see in certain Greek tragedies. What the hell happened here? Now, again, I can't say that this would have been anything that could have averted what Chris Chan would eventually become, right? And it certainly may not have helped him address the more extreme social issues, the racism, the bigotry that he displays. Everyone interacted with Chris, and everyone basically made a demand of him that he had to respond to them like he was a functioning adult. I remember many of the phone calls between him and the webmaster, where the webmaster kept saying, "You're not acting like a man. You're not acting like an adult, Chris. You need to man up. This isn't how adults behave." Of course, that's not how adults behave. He is incapable of understanding the consequences of his actions. He has autism. Autism is fundamentally a social issue, a problem that basically establishes a wall between you and the social world that you exist in. It's incredibly frustrating to see these people expect Chris to behave in any way other than what he is. The frustration, the mounting isolation. What would have happened if he had just had people like him? If he'd been able to connect with people like him? Obviously not in the exact same way, but people who would have understood him. If he had had a community of people that he could actually have relied on, right? And essentially, it would have been easier for him, or at least more realistic for him, to pair up with someone in a romantic way, because they would have been on an even playing field. They would have been more equals. We talk a great deal about, and again, another one of the reasons that I chose this video to discuss is the big question I've been asking myself a lot lately, comes up in my videos over and over and over again. Where does the line between personal responsibility end and mental illness begin? Right now, Chris Chan belongs in prison for his protection and for the protection of others. But have we failed him? Has society failed him too? I don't know. Like, how much do we owe people with mental illness? How much do we owe to take care of those who struggle to take care of themselves, right? So many people out there are going to argue that you can't have all these people living off of government welfare the way that he was. It wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed intervention. His parents weren't able to give him what he needed because they probably didn't understand what he had. They were unable to provide what he needed. Everyone around him refused to provide what he needed because they were getting something from him. It's a massive, massive failure of empathy, a sink, a hole of empathy, a black hole of empathy that's just circling around and around. And the big irony of all of it is that that's one of the things that Chris Chan himself never seems to have quite figured out. He's never really seemed to figure out how his actions affect others. Is that because of his autism, or is that because of a personal failing of his? Maybe if he had help, he would have been able to develop that ability. Can one develop the ability to empathize and feel the pain of others? I've actually lost sleep over this question. There are a lot of assumptions we make about human behavior, about humanity itself, our basic attributes, what we are. And do we assume that humanity is at default good? What is good, right? Maybe it's better to say, is humanity at least, I don't think humanity at its base is evil, but humanity at its base, when we're born, we are self-serving. We look out for ourselves first. I don't really believe in the concept of evil anymore in the sense, but I do believe in a kind of like, animalistic self-obsession and self-servingness. It takes effort, it takes growth, and it takes a great deal of parental skill and effort to raise a human being that actually understands and empathizes with others. And what we have with Chris Chan is a giant singularity of empathy where even Chris seems to have, well, he never had it in the first place, I don't think. Is that a character flaw that he never had that? I don't know. These are incredibly, incredibly deep questions, and they're troubling ones, right? Because they speak at the core of who we are. I'm going to leave with this. I don't know if I'm going to return to this subject later because it is something that's actually kind of taxed my brain a little bit. But I'm going to leave with this. You can't look away from what happened here. We would like to ignore it, and we would like to write it off as a bizarre, weird soap opera of the internet filled with drama and comedy and tragedy. But what we've actually had here is a study in the extremes of the brain and of the mind itself. And this is kind of like a little bit of a question of what the Joker says in The Dark Knight. Again, I know it's incredibly cringy to invoke the Joker, but there is a strange bit of truth to this. It's like when you strip away all of the expectations and you strip away everything that makes us, who we are, will we eat each other, right? At our base? I don't think so. I mean, damn. You'll get an animal. You'll get an animal that is willing to do things to survive. But the animal that you get when all that stuff is stripped away, when all the trauma is experienced, when the horror is confronted, you can't blame the animal for doing things it needs to do to survive, because that is what it is at its base. All of the good, all of the positive happens despite our nature. And that doesn't necessarily have to be depressing. It can be a very encouraging thing that, the good that we do is because of the effort we put into our growth. And I just don't think Chris Chan had a lot of opportunities for that growth. I think that he was cut off from society and he was left to languish. And he was tortured to the point that he had no choice but to become something primal and horrifying. I think that's one of the things that happens if we don't have the opportunity to create more out of ourselves. It doesn't always have to be the result, but it often is. And you don't have to condemn it, but in a lot of ways, you do have to accept it. Anyway, thanks a bunch for sitting through this rant. I don't know if I'm going to return to this one or not, because maybe next time I'll talk about like balloons or something. I have a horrible fear of balloons that I've been wanting to talk to you guys about. It is traumatizing, but it's also funny as hell. In any case, I'm going to leave it here. SummerSlam. Yeah, looking forward to that. I need some greased up men in man panties violently colliding over and over and over again to help me get over what I have seen through this documentary and what's to come. I can't stop. I don't understand how something so painful and so wretched can be so addictive, but it is. Like, I got that song from Trent Reznor, I have been hurting myself every day by watching this, and I can't stop doing it. So, I've started on a new addition to the memoir about my time in the mental hospital, and I'm enjoying writing it. I don't know if anybody will enjoy reading it, but I'm enjoying writing it. So thank you very much. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and see you next time.